Ah, look at Mickey. He's a bad, bad man. And then up, no ignition. Up, ignition's hot. Up, no ignition. Up, ignition's hot. I'm a simple dude. That's just the way it is. All right, guys, we're back to continue the build of the Antonov An-2, otherwise known as the Anushka. This is a Maxford USA model from Gator-Rc. Next up, guys, we're getting the wings on here. So this is what things look like with the wings. Again, we have a wing tube here in the back for the more aft spar. The more forward, they don't use a wing tube. Again, not sure why they do that, but there is 3 carbon dowel rods to support it. But I'm going to soak all of this rib in here, and I'm probably going to see if I can get in the inside a little bit more, and we're going to soak that up. But for now, this is going to be okay. We have the dowels completed in the front. We have those pieces in the back. I soaked that little trim piece with CA. And a little tip for you guys, if you don't want those to come loose, we're going to just cut a small piece of silicone tubing, maybe a 1/16 of an inch thick, and slide it over the thread so it squishes between the washer and those bolts. Lock washers on wings that vibrate sometimes don't work out the best. Silicone tubing does. So here's this. Now, this has the same setup as the PT-17 from Dancing Wing. What holds the wings on are these little carbon supports. Those carbon supports look like that. So I grind down the edge so we have place for the epoxy to bite onto, right? They give you these little screws. They are M4s that you slide in through those holes and into the carbon. Now, the best way to do this, a lot of instructions, there are none here to tell you, but a lot of instructions tell you to glue that in there, measure the distance, and adjust. That's nothing but a lot of aggravation. So what we are going to do is we ground that down, and instead of using these, I wound up making thumb screws, so that way I can take them on and off without tools, because you know what's going to happen to this covering. You're going to poke holes in it trying to get those screws out. It's a lot easier to do this. So fasten that through that hole first to hold it, and then go ahead and slide it onto that location. Now I'm going to do the other one, and I'll show you what that looks like. Worth noting, when you guys are putting these spars in, the big leading edge spar on the top is actually shorter than the one on the bottom. So the longer of the two goes on the bottom, and then the ones in the back are the same size on top and bottom. But again, the top one is the shorter of the two. All right, here you go. So this is the correct left side. That's all ground up. The thumb screw is in. So all you're going to do is you're going to test fit. And we're going to slide these in first. And make sure that that carbon piece goes in the intended slot. Come around the front here where I can see a little bit better. All right, you guys are getting on the stand because I got to hold stuff. There you go. All right, and that's what we're looking for. We want to make sure that that carbon piece does not bottom out and make this wing stick away. So now you would have everything matched up perfectly. So I'm going to take it apart And I'm going to apply a lot of epoxy onto those pieces, and then in that slot, the top and the bottom are the same way. So we're going to fill in that with epoxy. We're going to put some epoxy on there, so that way when the wing is now slid into place, we're going to let all the wings together. We'll put the cabane struts in there and everything else, so that way this whole thing can sit and cure with those pieces in. Now here's a little tip: if you want, put some tape around the wing and stuff like that, so if you get a little bit of oozing epoxy around here, it doesn't want to stick to the wing pieces. So we're going to put tape here around, and then we're also going to put tape on the wing on this side, then nothing sticks. So when you pull it apart, the tape will pull apart, and then we'll probably put a little bit of tape there just for drippers and things like that. So let's get some wings set on here, and then we're off to talk about the engine. Now what I did is I took that stick up against the firewall, took the standoffs and placed them on the engine the way I wanted to, and now this whole unit can slide out until that thing gave me the depth that I was looking for. And I don't need quite an exact just yet, but this way it gets me a pretty close location. And now you can go ahead and take your Sharpie and mark right along the top and the side of the box. Mark on here top. Probably best to do that earlier so that you never drop this and you lose which way is up, right side, whatever. Now, I made a template for the standoffs in the back here. And normally, once you find centers, you can just go ahead and place that on there. Now, there's nothing on the front of this plane that accounts for down or right thrust, so dealing with that P factor. So I basically know that I'm going to come out about 1/8 of an inch to start. I think we'll probably be okay with that. The ME60 is not a DA100 powerhouse that I'm using here. So basically I slid this to the right 1/8 of an inch and up 1/8 of an inch. So that way when I shim it 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to come down back into center. Mark those, kind of roughed out the area for my carburetor opening. And now I can take this whole box out. Let's get the drill in and carbon, mock up the engine, and set it in the inside of here. All right, guys, we got our cowling fit. We're going to make some last minute adjustments here with just a little bit of the areas that we want to grind out for choke and throttle and things like that. Now, I think I'm going to do a pits style muffler on this. I think this factory muffler is going to create a lot of issues with getting the cowling on. So I think a pit style is going to be a little bit better, a little bit cleaner of a look. I'm going to note down in the comments below the length of my standoffs that I'm using, plus the distance. I made this box in order to help you guys out. But what I want to do right now is go ahead and get that dummy engine fit. And on the dummy engine, one of the things I did is I cut off all the rings on the front, and we place this here, roughly putting the drive gear kind of in that opening. And I marked the back here. We're going to grind all of that out and see if we can get this thing to work in there or not. I'm hoping we can. If we can't, we can't, but let's see what we can do. All right, guys, so this is where we're at right now. I marked off the top of the box. You saw me test fit the cowl there. That's just enough if I want to use those braces. And then you can also opt just to glue in triangle stock, which is, I don't know, I think I'm going to put the braces in first, just screw them in. They're not going to be, at this point, structural. I just want to make sure that everything stays lined up. I'll put the brackets in just to hold everything, and then I'll permanently epoxy those in. Once that's epoxied in, then we're going to fireproof or fuel-proof the firewall. Make sure that that's all sealed up. And we're just going to thin out some epoxy, some 15-minute epoxy, and then brush that stuff all over here. And then also in the inside, you can see where I mounted the brackets that they give you for the throttle servo. They give you that little ply opening, and then the little half moon pieces are underneath. I mounted myself a choke servo because I put that on automatic, so that way when the engine cranks for a couple seconds, then the choke will start to come on if it's a little long in the crank cycle, so that way it gets fuel and fires up. I did that with my Zero. That worked out really well. But otherwise, I think fuel system wise, I slid that back into there. I glued in the one big square block that they give you, and then that'll give me a little bit of room to cushion behind and then below, so I can strap that thing in there and keep that pretty close to where the CG is going to be. So what's on the agenda for today? The epoxy for where we left off for all of our carbon pieces that hold the wings on are all going to be dry. So we're going to remove both wing pieces so we can get all of that tape we put in there to protect the wood from sticking together. We're going to slide the wings apart. We're going to do the reinforcements on the wood in the center section. I'm going to debate here whether I'm going to do things as a one-piece removable section or a full top wing and then a bottom wing section. I'm not real sure. We're going to go ahead and pop off. Let's just pull this off while we're here. So we're just using that as clearance testing. So we're going to get done with our engine. All of our sealing stuff is all done and dry, which is really nice. We're going to go ahead and get our ignition mounted in here. We're going to get a temp sensor mounted in here. We're going to figure out what we're going to do with our muffler. We're going to start to run potentially wires for our starter to our relay solenoid and just start to button up everything that we need to get done here for the motor. As we pop off this canopy and we look in the inside, we're going to start to get our fuel system put together and buttoned up, start to figure out where we're going to run all of our wiring, get our wing wiring completed, potentially our rudder pull system, and then we have flying wires to get done. Once all that's done and we do our power up, then I'll just go ahead and I'll set all the linkages for the ailerons and flaps. So we got quite a bit of work. We'll cover each section as we get it done. Let's get to it. All right, if you guys haven't ever put in a rudder pull system before, I've done several videos on this. If you're going to cross the cables, you need an offset arm. The distance between those two bolts, your pivots there, should be the same distance from the horn hole here over to the other side. Now, they give you wire here, pull wire, and the idea of the pull wire is just to thread it through. The idea of the pull wire here is just to loop it through that horn and go back. I didn't do that. I opened up the holes a little bit. I put in a ball link. I put in a thread adjustment. They give you nice turnbuckles, but I just sooner use this setup. The other setup will work. It's just 10 different ways to skin the cat. So we'll tighten that up here. You go ahead and you can actually put some heat shrink on here as well if you want to cover that up. If your crimp is big enough, I like to go through, come back and loop it in again and then pinch it. But the one supplied here only big enough for the wire 2 times, which is fine. Just make sure that you get a nice crimp in there. I actually use crimping pliers for this stuff to make sure I get a good crimp. But we're crossing cables. Up here on this end, again, offset. Make sure you're using some type of standoff underneath there. And what I did notice in this plane as well, so as we do this, we need adjustment. Again, these are the turnbuckles they give you. They're pretty decent, but I just opted to use something else. Power up the servo, make sure that the servo is centered across. Make sure that your rudder is straight so you can get these cables pretty taut. You don't need to play the guitar on them, but they need to be taut. The other thing that I noticed is that your elevator wires come down in the same path as the pull cables. So I'm probably going to have to get back in here so I can drop the cables down another layer and come in. I don't want the cables bouncing around with the elevator wires and stuff like that. That'll be bad over time. So we just have to reroute some things a little bit. But otherwise, that is the one side done. Let's go ahead and get side number 2 done. I love it. Yep, that's my ignition arming light in his hand. Love that. Being able to make your own wires is cool, so you got to make your own wires. It takes forever. But anyway, we got it. It's right. It's fairly clean, so check it out. First off, the ignition module. Couldn't mount it center. Tried it there, and then I was like, oops, can't reach the mixture screw. So I offset it enough not to bend the spark plug wire and have it shoved over and break it. But that way it's enough. The cowl still goes on, and I'm clear of my mixture screws. From rclightsystems.com, we have in our RPM telemetry module. So the nice thing about the EME is the EME has the extra spark out wire, so I can pick up the signal right through that wire into this module, convert it over to Jeti EXT or Jeti XBus, and that goes back to the receiver. We have our temp sensor mounted in here along the cylinder head, so that will get fed back to the receiver as well. We have our power supply coming in. We have our crank pickup wire, which will go into right here. We'll get all that tidied up. So most of that wire is done. As you guys can see, if you look up in here, you can see we have our relay for the starter motor, which I still have to do those power wires yet. Those will come over into here off of that one. The wire going into the receiver tucks in underneath there, and all those wires will come up through that grommet right there. My batteries I'm going to place up top in here. We have my optical ignition kill there, and then that's going to be fed through over into the receiver. We have whoa, Minnie Mouse, and then we have Mickey over here, who is holding my ignition hot LED into the window. So we made good use of that as well. And like I said, the rudder pull's done. And one of the things that I did there, let me pop you guys upside down. I don't know if it'll pop upside down or not. Here we go, we're upside down. Way back in there, I had to take all of that wiring for the elevator and run it underneath those supports because I didn't want the rudder pull rubbing on the elevator wires. So let's make sure you're back upside, right side up. We have everything tidied up here in the rear. Everything is done with the rudder pull. Everything is tightened up with our steering. So that's all done. The tail's all done. We have a couple wires to finish here. We have the muffler cut out to do there. And then we could throw the receiver in, power things up, and set things up. Now, also the nice thing is about the choke on this, like I had said before, the choke's going to be wired in with a mix with a delay. So once I start hitting this push button on my radio, I usually push button, after like 2 seconds, the choke starts to close. So that way, if it's a hot start, the thing will fire up right away. If it's a cold start, more than 2 to 3 seconds worth of cranking, the choke will start to slowly close while it's cranking, and that way it only allows in the right amount of fuel till it pops and turns over. I did that with my Seagulls Model 0 also. Another really cool Gator-Rc project that I did. Links all over the place. Hopefully I remember to put them there. If not, kind of remind me in the comments, will you? It's been a lot of time down here already trying to get this thing all set up. But still not sure what we want to do with the wings. We'll get the bottoms on. That's easy, but I don't know if I want to set everything along the top and one piece or multiple pieces. But I think we're pretty far along. Just got a couple things yet to tidy up. So I'm burned out. Catch you guys tomorrow. Remember, guys, whenever you solder in your connectors, you're going to go ahead and tin this side of the connector and your wire, so that way you don't have to get something super hot and you wind up with what they call a cold solder joint. But anyway, make sure you always put your two halves of the connector together. That keeps the pins in line, and it helps to dissipate a little heat. So sometimes the simplest tricks are just the best time-saving thing ever. So I just strapped a laser to a can, and it leaves a laser mark. Hopefully you guys can see that right there at the bottom, and that's where the exhaust outlet's going to be. So how did we come up with that? This trick works for everything. We're going to use it for needles, the mixture needles at the top and everything. But okay, so imagine where that spot is right there. The other thing with my cowling, you guys are going to notice, if you look here, there's a nylon spacer in there. That way, when I put my screws in and these funky anodized washers, I actually have a nylon spacer in there to prevent vibration from ruining the cowl. Plus, I tighten against it, and the shoulder on the backside tightens against here, so I don't wind up with wear of the cowl or squished wood on the plane, and I'll show you how I do that. So it took a while to figure out the right size of those, but I wound up ordering them a bunch online, and there you can see the nylon shouldered washer on the inside. So it's like a T, if you will, but all I'll do is I'll sand that down pretty flush, maybe just a hair above the paint, and then I can go ahead and squeeze the life out of that thing. And I'm not squeezing the cowl, I'm squeezing the plastic nylon spacer. So anyway, to figure out your spacing with this laser, all I did was put my thumb over the end of the exhaust like this, and if you mount the exhaust into place, you'll see that laser shows up right at the bottom of my thumb. So as long as I don't move the plane, I know that that's center of my muffler. Put the cowl on, set it in place, and now you know exactly where to drill. So always tons of tips from just plain crazy. Let's get this thing cut out. All right, and there you have it. That is about as clean as we're going to get. I did want to go with a wraparound muffler, but even the way that sits, it would still come out the side just as much, and this would be just down in there, so why even bother? But otherwise, I'm very happy with the way that turned out. We got our auto start going in there, got the gear hidden in our dummy engine, and of course we'll have our little decorative washers on there. So this is just held in for alignment, but that's more than enough for tonight. Done. See you tomorrow. Ah, look what I got. From Aircraft International, I got a 4-blade 20x10 prop. Comes in a big box, got some little paint protective tips on there. Let's get those things off. And look at, checketh that out. That is going to look sweet on there. And then just a stock prop plate. Yep, let's take the covers off. Necessary Jeti goodies. All right, guys, all this is all now soaked in with CA, and I think that stuff's pretty rock hard. So we'll see. I touched up some of the white underneath, so we got a little overspray in there. Don't care about that at all, but I wanted to make sure everything there was soaked in the CA to make that as solid as possible. So we'll see how those work during the maiden with those 3 triangle spar tubes in there. Now we're going to go ahead and solder up our switch connectors. So we have our Voltario switch here, so we can monitor how many milliamps are pulled out of those receiver packs. So we're going to put some EC or XT30 connectors on the end of those, and then that MPX we're going to go ahead and solder on the feed in to our receiver, plus we're going to make a pigtail out to feed our ignition. So everything will be monitored by this one by doing that. Let's get to it. In this plane, we're going to use a 12-channel Jeti Rex receiver. We're going to use all those channels. So 900 megahertz backup, again, completely separate frequency. So if 2.4 ever develops an issue, it kicks over to 900 until 2.4 is clean and right back. I've never had it go over here, but with really cool models, we like a little bit backup. There is our connector. We will have this lead here running over to our ignition to power that up. And then we have here our 2 battery connectors. So all that turned out really clean, really nice. And then we have, as always, which I love on these switches, you have this touch resistance switch. So there's actually no mechanical parts, and obviously it's a fail open always switch. Anyway, let's get that stuff placed and let's start hooking up parts. All right, guys, we're going to call it a wrap for tonight. Let me show you what I got done. So we have our throttle servo. We put Loctite on the bolt, and we put just a drop of hot glue on it. Yeah, A, so it never comes out, but B, so that way I know I tighten this stuff. I don't have to worry about it. We have our resistance switch right there. So once the canopy is off, I can just reach my hand in there and touch. And if you guys can see it, we have Mickey's hand right there set up with my arming LED that can be seen through the window. We have our batteries mounted right up top here, and then down below we have our 900 megahertz receiver. We have our antennas different directions here. The regular receiver, the antennas run down and they are mounted in the back of the plane at different angles and altitudes, different heights. Again, our optical kill switch that we bring over. We have a telemetry expander, a 2-into-1, which has our RPM sensor and our temp sensor. And then in the back, you can see that we have our channel expander for telemetry, where we're running RPM, temperature, and then all the input information from our Vario. We set up our Vario so that way it splits the battery voltage evenly. As it wears down, it tries to keep them the same, and we'll monitor that in our radio. And let me show you how we set up the choke. If you guys can see that, when we hit the button, you'll see the light turn on the controller. So that means that that would start the starter on the motor. And you can watch the choke servo as that light comes on. It's a very slow delay. So the longer that engine cranks, the more closed that choke is going to be. That way it's not full on, but it's in a delay. Let me show you how I did that. Now that feature works really well. I did it on my 0. So all we're going to do is go into our menu, and we are going to go towards our model, and we go to function assignments, and you'll notice I put my throttle and choke on P6, which is my button. So they are on the same channel, more or less, and we escape out of that. We go back to our model and we go to servo setup, and we'll select that choke. And as we come down, you'll see that I just dial in a 7-second delay on that. And you can go ahead and change that delay to whatever you want, depending on how quickly you want that choke to come in. And then you can just set up your regular starter under servo setup as well. So as we go into here, you'll see starter on there, and then all the ability to set that up is there as well. So with that being said, that's the setup. Electronics are more or less in, guys. The only thing that we have to get done is our wings and flaps. We have to get those wires brought in through the top wing and make a connector, so that way everything can come up and just clip in with one clip and be done, and we're not messing with a bunch of things. So pretty clean, happy with everything installed on the inside. That wraps this up. We got to get this done tomorrow. It's right before Memorial Weekend, and guess what I want to fly? I want to fly this thing. I want to maiden it, going up to Williamsport again to hang out with the crew. It's going to be a good time, and hopefully we get to maiden this thing up there and get everything wrapped up. So got a lot of work to do tomorrow night. So get some rest. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, guys, we're up early. We got stuff to get done. So let's see if we can at least get this fuel system knocked out. What we have to do here with the fuel system, again, this unit didn't come with a tank, so this is a 500cc tank, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's somewhere around like 17 ounces. More than enough for 50cc for this capacity. What we're going to do is, I took the tank apart, and I'm going to take off that clunk, and I'm going to put on one of my ceramic clunks that I pick up on Amazon. So the nice part about the ceramic ones, I have the same one on my can, filtered coming in, filtered before the engine. They don't disintegrate or fall apart or anything else. So those are really cool. I'm going to take the brass clunk off of here, and I'm actually going to make this line longer, and I'm going to put that clunk back there. Or you could leave the clunk completely off. It really doesn't matter. And the reason that I'm doing that is, in a tail dragger with these setups, when the tanks sit like this, it'll never pull all the fuel all the way out, and then you're left with all this fuel at the back of the tank. So that's why I run that line all the way back there. We'll time lapse this, and then I'll show you the heat shrink end that I put over to seal the tank. The vent, we're going to take the vent right here. We're going to do a big loop across the top of the tank, and then we are going to run that out the front to a nice little clean air valve here that we'll have down at the bottom of the plane. So anyway, let's get to finishing up the fuel system. When you go ahead and screw on these caps, always look through the inside and make sure that the O-ring that's in there in the cap doesn't get pinched or is crooked or out of place. So give that thing a good look from the inside, make sure everything's good, turn it, get it nice and tight. I take 1.5 inch shrink tube, and we're going to place this over the front. Now that one's a little wide, so we're going to do a little trimming, and we're going to heat shrink that around to not only the cap but the base. That'll help seal it in case the O-ring ever decides to leak, but it also makes sure that the cap don't come loose. Our fuel system is now complete. We have our fuel system in, put a piece of thin foam underneath, got our cool Gator-Rc fuel tank straps. Our vent is run and looped over the top of the tank, comes up and is held in with some holders, goes down through the hole, and then we have this nice clean vent right there at the bottom. Our filler, I made just a bracket, put that right here on the inside, so we can just, once the canopy's off, we can pull that hose up and out. There's enough there to get it out over the side, and we could fill that baby up. From the filler, you guys can see again, there's the heat shrink that we put over the filler neck, and we have our feed line that runs from there straight up and over the side to the carb. I left a space in here because that's where we're going to put the battery for the starter. Otherwise, that is our fuel system. It is complete. So you are able to turn those vents, those nipples, turn that 180 to start my loop that way. So remember, the vent's the one without the hose. The filler and extractor is the one with that hose that we put the weighted brass thing there on the end. But as you look over the front of this engine, we are complete in here. We tested all of our sensors, everything works, picks up, I get RPM, get temperature, that's good to go. So you know what time it is? It's time to throw on that cowl and let's drill the prop. Don't forget to balance your prop. Pretty happy with that. No complaints. When it comes down to putting the bolts in the muffler, we're going to clean that off with alcohol as well as the cylinder head. We're going to use red high temp RTV. This stuff here, we're going to use some red Loctite, and we're going to put just a little bit on those bolts, and we let that stuff set up overnight, so that way it kind of acts as a vibration damper in there and really doesn't compact like a gasket will and fall off. So a lot of people use that trick. I've used it for a very long time myself. That's what we're going to do there. And also in the boot, if you don't do it, get a little bit of dielectric grease and just a little bit in the inside of there. It actually acts as a insulator, but also will let you take this off the plug wire a long time from now. It doesn't kind of weld itself. But anyway, we're going to get the cowl on, we're going to throw on the muffler, and then get this wrapped up. All right, so we're going to finalize the wiring for the connectors. I think I'm going to leave this whole wing one piece. And those screws, they're a little difficult to get in there because you're going in at an angle. If you want to replace those with a hex head, that may be a little bit better. So you could use a ball driver getting in there, especially one of the rounded Dubro ones at an angle, whatever. We have our control rods just kind of set in here for now until we power everything up. But I do think this whole wing is going to be easier to transport in one piece. You can see I got my button screws in there holding it all together. This thing is, I mean, it's a long wing, but I think it'll transport well this way in my trailer up on my rack, and I don't have to worry about a whole lot. And we'll see what the flying wires look like and what it's going to be like to get those last couple screws in the bottom. Now, I did harden up all the wood points all the way around with these strut braces. So I soaked in some thin CA in those areas just to make it a little bit more sturdy. But we're done down here, guys. Let's get up to the garage and get this thing kind of tested, balanced, and finish the last couple settings we have for throws on the ailerons. All right, guys, we're up here in the garage. I want you to check this out. So I just put the wing on there and I wanted to test fit, kind of get a rough idea of things and see where it looks. But this thing's kind of awesome looking. It's so different and unique. I love it. Got a really fat fuselage, really big horizontal stabs. The wings, this plane has a presence because it's so stocky. It's like a bulldog, right? Check out Mickey. Whoa, look at him in there. I can't wait to show you that with the light on. Whoa. Anyway, I pulled the canopy off, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my wing connectors, if I wanted to secure them or what I wanted to do. So I just had the harnesses off the receiver and noticed that I did one male and one female, and these are polarized, which means from Hansen Hobbies, they're locking, so there are no clips needed. And when you do it this way, there's no way to get things hooked up backwards. This is all the wiring out of the wings that go through the center section. But there's so much room going through this thing right here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut the wire here. I'm going to put the connectors on it. And then I'm just going to be able to hook that stuff right through here and not try and fight it as I'm getting the wing on. So I think we have a good length chosen. We're going to snip all that stuff there and we're going to go ahead and make connectors. Now we're going to go ahead, now that all of our surfaces work, we're going to go ahead and adjust our rods and get things hooked up. It really does appear you're going to have to make these really, really short. Now that we have power to our ailerons and everything works, we're going to set up our flaps and our throw. It really does appear to me you're going to have to get these as short as you can. And it's always a good idea. I see people that have failures with the metal rods. Don't take the nuts out. The nuts help keep that jam, that's why they call them jam nuts. They keep those threads jammed together so that way that pull isn't stressing the threads and then pop them and then all of a sudden poof, off they go. Make sure you're using nuts if you got metal and metal, and also you don't want the stuff on threading, which also happens. So let's get stuff hooked up, centered, and adjust throws. Ah, look at Mickey. He's a bad, bad man. And then up, no ignition, up, ignition's hot, up, no ignition, up, ignition's hot. I'm a simple dude. That's just the way it is. Yeah, buddy, I do things a little bit different. I set the whole plane up the way I want. I deal with the balance issues later. This is a big plane with a lot going on. It's time to get it off the bench and balance this. Let's see how it works out. All right, guys, to put on the flying wires, we're going to have to go ahead and take those screws out. We have a total 4 of them, there, and then 2 at the top. These brackets will get installed on there, and when we take those screws out, we're going to go ahead and install a little blue Loctite. Don't mix up your screws. The longer ones go in the top, and the shorter ones are going to go into the bottom. So again, all we're going to do is take our bracket. We're going to place that screw in there. Get your Loctite. Don't drip this on the plane, it'll eat it. Just a little bit on there. And we're gonna screw this thing up in there. Now, one of the things that the directions said is that they want you to screw the turnbuckles and attach the turnbuckles to this thing. They want you to attach the turnbuckles to those brackets. I don't know if that's something I want to deal with every time it's taking them bolts out. I think we're going to have to find a better way, because the last thing I want to be doing is messing around with a bunch of small bolts at the field. And also the last thing I want to be doing is taking these brackets and these screws in and out of this plane every time. So let's get the rest of those on, and we got some figuring out to do. All right, guys, here's my fix. So this is a regular 256 clevis, and these little eyelets from Home Depot, Walmart, Lowe's, wherever you can find them. They're not even the right thread, and I don't care, but I'm about just minimizing the amount of effort it's going to take to put this together at the field. So all I'm going to do is just thread this eyelet all the way in, and then we're going to put it here. And we're gonna get that baby hot. Bring the heat. A little bit. And just run a little bit of solder into there. And let's take it out. Soldered up. Perfect. Let's do another one. So again, 256 clevis. Just gonna thread that eyelet all the way in there. And now all I'm gonna have to do when I get to the field is just spread that apart and take them off. And I'll actually wire those turnbuckles in right in the middle, so that way I still have something to work at to keep tension and be able to adjust. It doesn't take much. There you go. Let's get to it. And this is what my flying wires look like when they're finished. So we have our clevis, we have that little loop that we soldered in there. We have our crimped wire, so it comes down from the top. It's gonna come all the way down. I put a turnbuckle here. It goes from this bracket over to this bracket and then back up to another eyelet and clevis. Here we have an eyelet and a clevis coming up. There we have our turnbuckle through the one bracket, through the back bracket, and then back to there. And then that way, again, we put the Loctite on all of those screws at the top and the bottoms. So that way we're not taking those things in and out of the plane, in and out of the plane. All we're gonna do is we're gonna pop that off, and these cables, these two cables right here, are just going to hang with your wings or whatever else. So really minimized how quickly we're going to get this thing apart, or minimize how much time it's going to take to get it apart, I should say. So there you go. I hope you like it. I'm happy with the flying wires the way they are. So they give you pieces. We just got to figure out what's the best way to do this and not be a pain. So I'm pretty happy with it. Well, guys, it's pretty late, but we're ready for Memorial Day weekend flying and maidening and showcasing the Antonov An-2 from Maxford, USA and Gator-Rc. I can't wait to get this thing out to the field, but let's check out a few things here on the plane and show you how I wrap this up. So we could see battery. I got lucky. I don't know what it is, but when you kind of spread your gear out and put some of the bigger weight towards the front, slide a little bit towards the CG, I just get lucky with planes balancing that way, and I don't have to add weight or move a bunch of junk around. This thing balanced right on the money. Tomorrow I'm going to try and get you guys a total all-up weight so we can see what we're dealing with. But starter battery is just simply Velcroed right in the inside, right there next to that starter relay. Our flying wires are all complete with the loops and the clevises that we made. We have our buckles right here and here to tighten that stuff up if we need to over time, and I'm sure we will. Engines in there, as you saw, the motors in here, and you could see that the auto start works really well. We have all of our linkage set up, our throws are set up, and two things. Number one, there's no flap settings. The Antonov had flaps. There was no flap spec in the book. So we went with 15 degrees to start, and we went with 20 for landing. So 15s and 20s. And we'll see how that fares out. The other thing that I did is I used Aileron differential, and that's supposed to get you more of a uniform roll. So we'll see if that's enough. That's at 3/4 rate. The other thing that I did is I went with flapperons. So if I need more aileron, I'm gonna get it from there. So just something I put into the mix in order to make this thing hopefully fly as well as it can. So that kind of wraps up this build, guys. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate that a lot. Let's hit the wrap up. So in wrap up, guys, I love the 4-blade prop. Absolutely love that. I'll list the link down in the description below for it. I think the cowling and the paint job compared to the covering, the colors match really well. The hardware that comes with the whole plane overall is decent. I like how they had put the screws everywhere where they belong. There are things here that I just don't know where to go. So we had these, we had some other little metal rods, and then we had this big cardboard white piece. I have no idea where that's supposed to go. So maybe if you cut an access door somewhere, couldn't even begin to tell you. But anyway, the directions are horrible at best. The hardware is pretty decent. The build quality of the plane is actually pretty good. It's not perfect, but I'm very happy with it. So I love the ability to kind of, you know, add your own flash and details to it. I like that shock absorbing landing gear a lot. The dummy radial engine, the EME60 with the auto start's a perfect combination. I love that this canopy we figured out, right, kind of by accident, that thing comes off. So a lot of cool things here on this plane, but I can't wait to maiden it and see how it works out. And there you have it, guys, from Maxford, USA, available over at GatorRc. That was the Antonov An-2, the Anushka. 102-inch wingspan biplane sporting a 60cc engine in this case. They recommend a 50. I always love going up a little bit from recommendations. I'm going to get you guys an all-up weight tomorrow before we fly this thing so we can kind of see what we're dealing with. With that being said, guys, I appreciate you joining me, following along in this series. The directions weren't good, so the just plain crazy directions I hope are definitely adequate. The things that we did to it to make it our own, I hope you can use for guidance, and it helps you out a lot. Make this plane your own. That's the coolest thing about this Bulldog, is that it looks like a Bulldog. It's big and stocky. But anyway, you don't see these anywhere. This is the first one that I've actually seen. I know that there was some smaller models made, especially by Maxford a long time ago, but I haven't seen any at the field. So this one is kind of like one of a kind. But anyway, head on over to www.gator-rc.com, link down in the description below, and check them out. They have obviously the Maxford USA line, Seagulls models, Top RC model, one-stop hobby shop, family-owned business. Absolutely love dealing with GatorRc, and you will too. So again, it's Brendan here at Just Plain Crazy. You guys are just plain crazy for watching. I appreciate every one of you. If you liked it, do me a favor. It helps us out a lot if you smash that thumbs up button. If you're going to hit that thumbs down, make sure you hit that baby twice for me. Like, share, subscribe, all that cool shameless plug stuff. And I will catch you guys at the field for the maiden. Thanks again for joining me. As always, happy flights. Peace out.